on, Babu. Babu, sit up. Hold on. How do I do the sharing? Come on, Babu. Stop. Sit up. Do you want to share it on your phone or the? Oh, that is your phone.
Yeah. That's fine. We got any video watching?
Hold on. I'm trying to. I'm just trying to share. Yeah, share. No, back in the chat. That's just us.
Well, we might as well start, I guess.
Yeah.
Everybody, this is the Monday, October 13th. Is that right?
Yep.
7 p.m. stream for the school group. If you have any interest in joining or taking a look, school.com, Easy Street Billiards. You can join, requests, and all. Everybody's getting in for free. It's basically just a community group where you can put stuff in there, and we're just trying to support each other in our journey to get better. And I'm sort of moderating and administrating that, and all the things that people want to talk about on the group we'll talk about in this 1 hour stream. We're doing a couple of these a week for now, and anybody that wants to watch them can get on through the YouTube or whatever we're sharing on Facebook. And if you want to comment in the comment section, then we'll talk about that stuff. We're going to do it for an hour. Today the only subject that came up is dealing with selling out both in a match and outside of a match. I can see that a lot of this, I think it comes down to the perspective that you're taking, the narrative that surrounds the event. When I hear someone say selling out, I mean, that means, probably, if you're playing 9-ball, you're playing safe, and then you make an error on a safety, and then you leave an easy shot, or you miss a shot and then you leave an easy shot for your opponent, and then I guess the psychological effect of the selling out, obviously can send you in a downward spiral. I think that it's important to look at pool as kind of like shifting your perspective from an event having a negative consequence to more of being a journey towards a better future. And in order to do that, you got to take risks. And the nice thing about pool is that it's just a game and that there's not really anything at stake. So it is the right time to take, calculated risks. So if you think you're selling out, but really what you're trying to do is teach yourself. The way I frame it in my own mind, my perspective about it is, yeah, you're going to miss some shots and leave it out for them. And then if you see that that's, the result of the type of shot that you shot or the quality of your stroke potentially, then now you can see that it's more about preparing yourself to be okay with the outcome no matter what, knowing that it's just part of the journey. Is that at a certain stage in your journey, when you start being able to pocket the ball more easily and you start running more balls, then you're going to be feeling like you can control the rack a little bit. And then now towards the end of the rack, if you make mistakes, then that's just where you're at with the game, which you will be selling out. Some people, you don't get used to being able to run more balls, and then towards the end of racks or towards the end of their normal run, you get a little bit tired and you haven't quite learned how to continue to run more balls. And then towards the end of the rack, it's very common to people get stuck at that moment. And that's the moment where it's like, okay, well, if selling out makes me feel, some sort of way, then I got to address what is it that's actually, am I actually considering a sellout? And also what can I do in my mind to frame it more positively so it's not a negative thing. It's just yeah, I missed the ball, and then XYZ player won the match, or we were playing a team event and we lost a set because of that. You got to accept that that's just the way that some of the time it's going to go that way, and it will oftentimes come your way as well. It's not going to be one-sided where you're always going to lose and you're always going to be the one selling out, and that your opponent's never going to sell out, and that it's just you. Everybody sells out, so to speak, and everybody's in the same boat with it. We're just trying to minimize our mistakes, and selling out is one of those mistakes we're trying to minimize through having better, processes or better mental strategies that can help us move forward beyond feeling a negative emotion about one shot that happens. A lot of times the lead up to the shot could be that, well, if you left yourself really tough, now your shot you have in front of you is low percentage. And then, of course, now you're going to be selling out some more of the time than you would be had you left yourself better. But if you're only going to beat yourself up at the result of the shot that you actually, sold out on, and not the one that caused you to be in such a poor situation that now it was inevitable that you're going to sell out, then you got to look back further into the rack to see where was the first mistake that led me to the place where now I am in an untenable situation, where I don't like being where I am, where I don't have confidence that I'm going to be able to hit this shot properly, and I'm now thus have a fear in my mind that certain things are going to happen. And some of that could be alleviated earlier in the rack through just better management of the situation, or just whatever. But a lot of that is just learning how to move beyond where you're at. So I feel like if you're in a situation where you feel like you're selling out constantly, and now it's building itself to a larger thing, and I think what we got to do is prioritize reframing the event as being a less significant event than you're making it. Like I said, if you think, oh, okay, well, in a situation where I'm running the balls out, say I've got 6 balls on the table, playing rotation, just to be simple, and then I run 2 of those balls, and then I leave myself a little bit more difficult on the 3rd ball, which I then pocket, but now I'm in a pretty tough spot, with 3 balls left, and now I feel like, maybe the 8 is sitting in front of a hole, and then the 9 is pretty easy to make from where most people make the 8, so now you're on the 7, but it's a really tough shot, and you miss and leave it in the jaws, and now the guy's got 3 balls, so you feel like you sold out, and if you're looking and focusing so much on the last shot, then you'll take awareness away from your true mistakes, which are happening before that. The ones that are like easier to like get beyond are the ones where it's like situationally, I need to do a little bit of practice with playing position on a particular shot so that I can get a better position to continue my run. And because I didn't do that, I didn't achieve the better position that I needed to increase my percentages. Now I'm faced with a lower percentage shot, and now I'm also not aware that that's what's happening. So now I'm feeling like things are worse off when reality is it's just a numbers game. It's like the reason why you work on playing better position and work on better shot making is to increase your percentages, to do such things on purpose, so that then you can get further into the rack, which is just a percentage based thing. And the higher you keep your percentages, the more often you're going to run out. And that's really all you got to do is focus on playing proper position for every shot, and then obviously making the balls go where you want them to go. And as long as we're working towards doing that, then not any particular shot is that relevant. It's all about the body work and building the habits towards that extra consistency of knowing that once I am good enough to run a few balls and win racks and run racks out, now it's going to be like, well, I'm going to make this 9-ball, and then my goal then is to maintain control for the next several racks, even where it's like you don't even think about selling out anymore, because it's like in your mind, you've maybe moved beyond that. And that's an eventuality of you have to fail enough times and put yourself in a situation where I don't like the way that result was, and I need to make a change. So selling out is really a good thing in the long term, because then you're like, well, I don't like it. What do I really need to do to address this? And some of it's going to be mental, and some of it's going to be just experiential, where the more times you do it and the more time and energy you spend, like, okay, what am I doing really that's causing me to fail? Like, look back at the event, look back at the certain scenario, be objective about what's happening, learn about, like, okay, well, if I pay more attention earlier in the rack or whatever, I'm going to be having a little bit better position than I would have normally. And then now this last couple of balls is going to be much more routine than earlier in my career. I wouldn't really recognize that I'm capable of running so many balls in a row. I just didn't realize that all I had to do is just work on my position play, and then everything would come along. And then now I'd be used to making 4, 5, 6 balls in a row versus kind of burning myself out after a couple, not being used to that, even though maybe I'm capable of doing it. I just wasn't doing the little extra work. And then not just that, the stamina issue too, where it's like you got to focus for longer. The more balls you make in a row, you have to continue to keep your streak alive, to keep your run going, and you have to generate focus that whole time. If you lose focus, you're going to fall off, at some point. You can just flow around, and that works, as soon as you start to like lose your focus or you get distracted, now you have to pull yourself back in. And those are the moments when most people miss balls and get out of line, because they lost focus for a second for whatever reason. So partly it's a focus building thing. Pool, in order to be really good at it, you just have to have a lot of the ability to just focus when you feel like it. Just choose to be able to be, I'm focusing right now. I'm going to make this the most important thing. I'm not going to think about XYZ person over there or the result of this shot, because what matters is what I'm about to do to make my shot happen. And if I have a fear that I'm going to sell out, that fear is based off of a misrepresentation of what's really going on, which is that if you're supporting yourself emotionally through your activity, which is that you know that going into it you can make mistakes, and you also know that they're inherent in the skill building exercise of the pool, which is that you can't do anything the way you want to at the beginning. It's muscle memory and it's experiential, like skill development, and you have to spend time doing situational activities in order to develop situational skills that then overlap each other and create a cohesive pool game. And that all that activity requires you to make little mistakes that compound, and then when you go to a competitive environment, now they're really the emotional consequence, and then is magnified, and that causes a bigger emotional response, which is really what you want, because it identifies really the areas where which you're most unhappy about is the things that really put you on tilt are the ones that you should be addressing first, so that you can then enjoy yourself more. Because if you're afraid constantly about whether or not you're going to sell out for yourself or for your team, now the game's not as fun. So you have to figure out a way to either just say, hey, I'm rephrasing this, where I'm not actually selling out. This is just something that everybody goes through, because they do. Everyone goes through it, and that it's all good. And then as soon as I can realize that if I can just focus a little bit better, then these types of things will go away a little bit more often, and I can see it coming when I'm about to be in a situation where I might sell out, and avoid that consequence of selling out more often. And thus, overall, you're going to improve your play, because really selling out is just like, well, you lost control in a bad moment to lose control, and now you're going to potentially lose this game, and it looks how it looks, but truly, the result of each game is not what's so important. It's all about your decision making, and then you just pay attention to your execution as best you can, and then you can do an analysis of every shot. And now it doesn't matter so much if it's the end of the match or the beginning of the match or whatever, because you're kind of being more clinical about the whole process of it, knowing that each game leads into the next game. It's like, just because that game that you lose, you sold out on, maybe that is, ended up causing you to lose the match, maybe at that moment, that is the Hill game. Now you've sold out, and you're like, well, this will keep happening until I learn how to overcome it, and that becomes a challenge. Like, well, what do I need to do? Like I said, a mental thing, be more physically capable through just putting in more reps, and like running that rack out. Maybe you can remember the pattern of the balls where they were and shoot different shots, or you can, post a diagram for somebody to look at online or on the school channel or whatever you want to do, and then, there's tons of different ways. A lot of it comes down to like, okay, well, I got to really analyze the situation more deeply so that I can see exactly what I'm doing that I want to make changes about. Because some of the things you're doing are really helpful. You're being aware of the situation. You're being aware that you're having a consequence that you don't want to face anymore, so you want to change your behavior. Now it's like, okay, well, what is actually causing the error, and so you got to identify that a little bit. But then once you realize that you're going to go engage in this process, think about the fact that you're going to engage in the process of analyzing all your mistakes. Now you're taking away a little bit of the emotion of the mistake, because you know that you're going to get direct benefit over time through the activity of just analyzing what you're doing wrong and then choosing to make changes, so that you can then eventually learn how to overcome that little strategy error or mental error or whatever, that experiential, like just not having the experience to know that this is not the time to do the thing that you did that caused it to like all go south for you real quick. There's other times when you mess around with that, or maybe you see that you're mentally, you're distracted by certain types of things, and now you gotta like add, okay, well, I really need to make sure my last couple balls that I, take deep breaths, focus, slow down, really make sure that I'm playing my position properly, so that I can bet when I get to that last ball that I have a process which I can rely on to continue through this ball and onto the next rack, through being deliberate about what you're doing, and then deliberate about what your awareness is on, and not thinking so much in terms of like, I need to win this game or I'm selling out. It's more about, just saying, I got to make this ball go here and I got to make it go there. And if I can focus on that, then, the ball's going to go in more often, because I'm directly aware of it, and I'm directly, trying to have an intent for that thing. And my intent as well for the information that I receive once I perform the action is to then go back over and do the work of seeing what I did wrong, and then practice, my weaknesses to make them not so weak, and then eventually strong, so that you can move to the next little gap in your knowledge, or gap in your physical game, or gap in your mental game, to move yourself to the next place. And selling out's a tough thing, because it's like, I know you want to do well for your team, but if you think from a consciousness standpoint, wanting to do something doesn't make it happen. Performing an action that moves yourself towards the goal, even if it's a small action, that is how you do it. You know what I mean? It's if I want to do well for my team, then I need to be prepared. in my mind. It not just prepared to do the thing, but prepared to react properly and not be a drain on my team's energy if I am failing. Through being able to just roll with it and not be as reactionary and being proactive about your approach to to playing, then the selling out and feeling so bad about it is not going to be so much of a thing, because you're more conscious of like, well, yeah, I just overhit it or I underhit it or I left or right, and I'm there, and all I had to do is just at that moment see that and see that I was off, and then recognize it and then take steps to make it better, and it all comes down to like little things that will just turn your mind from it being such a negative thing, and just like reducing the way that you think about it negatively, and then at least making it neutral and not a big deal at first, and then eventually imposing a new strategy, a new habit of taking these like mistakes, so-called, these the negative consequences, and realizing that's actually where the easiest growth comes from, is be like, well, if I could just eliminate this negative behavior, then instead of that, I want to be doing this more often as a response, and then just work on that pattern as a process. And then now you'll see that thinking of it like each game is so important, that you are going to be negatively impacted or even overly positively impacted by the result of it, makes it harder, and just by like if I just keep working on the best process that I know, keep my body as relaxed as I can, stay as focused as I can on what I'm doing, and being practical about just being productive with my thinking about what I'm doing when it's time to play, and then I won't sell out as often, because I'll be more in the moment, which is a big part of it. When you start thinking, oh, I might sell out or whatever, a lot of that just comes from like you're looking into the future, and maybe you have a fear because you've done it before, and now you're perpetuating it, and then the fear comes because you're already like living the moment that you're about to live before you've done it, and then now you kind of draw it to yourself when you shoot the shot, and one of the difficult things to do is that at some point you have to just realize that you're about to do the thing that's going to cause you to sell out, and you just got to stop, and you just be like, this is the moment when I need to like stop, because this is the moment when if I keep going, that the bad thing's going to happen, and now this is my chance to grow. And then eventually you'll have that recognition where this is the moment when I could have just let things slide and it would have gotten worse, but I'm choosing to take an action here and be proactive about my thought patterns here, and do something a little bit different, and be a little bit more forward thinking about it, so that I can prevent the bad thing from happening and actually change my future, so to speak, to have the good thing happen now through the enactment of a new habit that overlaps and overcomes and minimizes the other habit that I don't want to see anymore, that I'm just eventually going to forget it even happened, and forget it was even a thing. Like, as you get better at pool, there's going to be millions of things that you improve on, and you won't remember any of them hardly. There's just going to be too many to list. Being afraid of selling out is just going to be one of those things, and knowing future self has already figured it out, and just kind of like, how am I going to feel when I'm not afraid to sell out anymore? What does that really feel like? It's just like, well, you just feel normal, actually. You just shoot the shot, the ball goes over there, and then you shoot the last ball, and as hard as or easy as it is, you make it or you don't make it, and then if you make it, you win. Now you get to shake the guy's hand. You lose by missing, say, then he runs a couple balls, you shake the hand. Either way, it's still a good game, good set, and you take what you get from that, and that's really what it's all about. It doesn't, how many times you're going to win and lose sets is like, well, I've played so many of those, I can't even remember hardly the outcome of most of them. All I know is that I went in there and I played as well as I could, and I learned my lessons over time, so to speak. So I think that's about all I got to say about selling out.
Brett's on.
Oh, Brett is on?
Yeah, he said,
Nice.
I found that I can use my imagination and visualize a crazy cut bank with 3 rails shape, landing perfectly on the next ball. Only to dog that ball, thinking I don't need the same mental process for the easy shot. Been working on being mentally consistent with each shot.
Right. Yeah. Brett just, I won't go into it, but it described basically making a great shot and through, diligent, work and positive thinking, and then making the shot exactly the way that you played it out, and then just basically getting lazy, so to speak, on the next ball and not utilizing that process, and that's a huge thing. Is just I think that when you focus on the process, that it seems almost like counteractive, like you're not going to have as much fun because you're focusing on the process and not riding, the emotions of pocketing every ball. you know I think that one of the things that people search for is they want these easy, like, cheap wins, and they want the cheap dopamine. And through pool, you can get it by making, good shots, and then you can also get it by, by, doing things and selling out, and now you get the energy, the adrenaline rush, and everybody has the thing, but I think that over time, it's like you realize more consciously from an objective standpoint that you want to have more of a viewpoint of long-termness where, I learned how to play the game and enjoy it under every circumstance, and then it was more about, at the end of your pool career, about learning how to just roll with everything and be relaxed and, like, find your best self, the one that doesn't get triggered and that is just there in the moment, enjoying themselves, trying to get better at the game, and knowing that that's just a process of how you go about figuring out how to show up every day to play, how you figure out how to, like, be there, be present, and enjoy yourself, be supportive of the people around you, and then find people that are then supportive of you as well, and how you are, and then, and knowing that the community is there to help you get better. At the same time, you have to go, and like really search for your particular reason that you're there. And then once you can find that, if it's like you want to become the best player that you can be, that's a whole thing where it's like, well, that's a process. You got to eliminate your negative behaviors. You got to add constructive ones. You have to visualize, your improvement, and all that is just building processes upon processes so that you can then automate as much as you can so you can keep moving forward. If you try to think and remember every single little thing that you have to do, because you have it like, well, I have one process that has 100 steps. Well, it's like, well, if you can remember that far, then yeah. But I think most people, it's easier to just set it up like you have little sub processes and sub programs that you can run that are easy, but they're all still going to be processes. And I think that even subconsciously, you're running them all the time without even knowing that. And then kind of like, once I started kind of identifying in myself that I am very process oriented, then I just started leaning into it where I'm like, well, I'll just make everything a process and then it'll all be more fun. Like playing video games, you're just like, well, once you get the button presses combinations proper, now you're set. It's the same kind of thing. It's just like, well, it's a more complicated version of a video game where you have to, like, be more finely tuned with the information that's coming in, because it's not like flashing, blinking lights. It's just pool balls that aren't moving, and there's cloth, and and then the effects of the air and all that stuff, and the temperature is things you have to pay attention to, and then you have to then be super finely tuned about your motion. But it is just like, if I can figure out the correct motion, which would be the button presses, which is a process, a sequence, and if I can get my sequence so dialed in that now I can do it without thinking about the sequence, and I can just do the move, which would be like, I can do the shot just with my body instead of with my fingers, and that's kind of how I started looking at, where it's like, if I can just streamline, all the button presses of the movements that I have to do and make it more choreographed, then I can just be like, this, I want to do this shot, low right English, and then it's gonna, like, I've been habituated how I do that shot so many times that it's kind of like feels the same to me as any other shot. I just get down the way I always do for that particular kind of shot, which is a process of recognition, so to speak, you know, and it just locks it in even more, you know, and then I'm constantly working to develop my processes because I know that one of the things is when you're, you know, when you really playing your best pool and you're not working on your process and you're just working on trying to be in the flow of things, you're really almost, to me, it's like your process comes after you play. You're like, you think about what you're doing after you've done it, and how, you think more about like how you did it, and then you explain how you did it versus before you do it. You can't really explain how you're about to do it, so to speak. It's almost like when someone asks me like, oh, how did you do that shot or whatever, I can't even really remember at the time. It's more like, well, I did it this way as an example of like how I would describe it clinically, but when I was actually shooting the shot, I was more of concerned with, you know, seeing it go in and not connecting to the words so much, but connecting to the feeling of the vision of it and the senses of it, so to speak. And that becomes like inherent to like your muscle memory, where you don't think I got to put my foot here. You feel it go there and you know that it's in the right place, you know. And I think that just starting out with a little bit of a rough process and then just adding to it little cues, and then you get to be more polished with it where you can tweak it a little bit more over time, just adds way more benefit. And then now you can kind of, you know, have areas where you know what you're doing, and then you have something to rely on. Like I have a process, you know, that covers every phase of the game, so at least when I'm competing, I know where I'm supposed to be using my mental energy, you know. And I think that's a benefit to me, and I think that anyone that hasn't really studied those aspects should look into that, because it's something that you'd be like, well, I don't get distracted as often because I have a task for myself set aside for every session that I play. And I think that then, you know, the game becomes more challenging in the sense that you're challenge your ability to focus. But as you build that ability to focus, then it gets easier, and then you realize that really just learning how to focus itself in the process of like regaining your focus is, you know, the whole game. Because it's, you know, once you're focused and you're paying attention, the game gets a lot easier, and now you're just hoping that you keep your focus, and then once you lose it, now you're like trying to find it again. So a lot of the time it's just like, okay, well, if I can learn how to focus better through different means, then I'm going to be a better player. So a lot of stuff that I try to help people do ultimately is like focus based activities, you know, like mindfulness through breathing, you know, or through just being a process oriented person where you have like a number system where it's like step 1, step 2, step 3, and you go down the list. Is something to focus on to keep you in this moment, focus on what's happening, and not thinking about what the result of, you know, if I miss this ball and then he runs out and then I lose, and then what happens, you know, to the effect of the whatever. All that stuff is not constructive towards how to make the next ball in front of you. You know, that's all process oriented stuff. If you're thinking outside of the process, now you know you're kind of, you know, outside of where you want to be, so to speak. So I love the processes, you know, and just thinking of that you can add a process to anything, and that you know, and evolve it is more just like, well, yeah, any repeatable event is going to be like, well, it's a cycle. How, you know, polished up is your cycle for this event? Like the way that you react, the way that you respond, depending on the nuances of how the cycle itself, you know, is variable, you know, because everything is kind of like the same but not. So we like build a cycle, build our own process that covers most of that sameness, but then leaves the openness to address the little bit of inconsistencies that exist, the chaos that exists in a thing that is like very repeatable, which is like pool. You know, the balls, they kind of have like set positions that they end up in, but they're like not the same ever, you know, but they're very similar a lot of the time. So you know, you kind of develop the same deal where it's like, well, if the balls are going to end up, you know, like roughly symmetrically some of the time, then I should learn how to operate when they're that way a lot of the time so I can be successful, you know. And I think that's the purpose of doing a lot of drills and stuff, is to teach you how to be more systematic about what you're doing without having to be so conscious about your way you create. You can rely on certain abilities that you need to have to be able to run the balls out, And again, that's just a process. Is that you learn how to make straight balls, and then cut shots, and then you start doing a little bit of English work or whatever, and it's a process of evolution, and then you constantly are coming back through it as part of the process of getting better. Is you got to analyze yourself, it's over time. You got anything else?
No, not yet. Still on.
What was I going to talk about? I don't know. I didn't really have too much today. What time is it?
7:35.
7:35. I'm probably just going to hit a few balls here. I just went back to my cue that I was playing with before my son was born, and I'm struggling a little bit with it because it's short compared to what I was playing with. I know that Mike said he might get on, but that first one was for him, the sellout thing. But that is a really good topic, I think. But I think a lot of it comes down to how you, the fact that you're even naming it as being a sellout is you're going into it as a negative thing, and then all you really got to do is just stop saying that I'm selling out, and then just call it any other thing that's either less negative or more positive, and then really that'll just eliminate it over time by itself. It's like, you got to label it by a different name, because it's not necessarily a sellout. Like, yeah, you lost the game. That's not how you have to call it. Be like, well, I hit this ball, to the wrong place, and that's what I did.
Brett had a comment. Being in the zone is almost like a dream state. I know I just had a dream, but I can't recall anything that happened. Like, I know I just had a dream.
Being in the zone is almost like a dream state. I know I just had a dream, but I can't recall anything that happened. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like a waking dream, right? Yeah, like I'm going to try to cut the 3, a little bit left English, and play 2 rails, and I'm hoping to end up down here. I almost don't mind the angle, because then I can come back all the way around for the 5. I can't really get to a good angle for the... But yeah, I just try to get to the, a very relaxed state, Like, and then I just feel like, what is it going to look like when it happens? Here, and then down here, right here. Yeah, I think I can play it here now. So high left, here, and back, so I can play 1 rail for the 7. And I would say that for anyone that's never tried this, it's a good way to play it, because it teaches you how to slow down enough to really play your shot in depth, And I would say the best way to do it would be to, before you really start talking about what you're about to do, is actually look at all the different opportunities, you know, like I immediately said I was going to go forward here, but another shot that could be legitimate would be to actually play 2 rails over around to this way, you know, if you were to get a little bit more like over here. And just seeing how it would be a little bit different if I had got to another spot, but just being open to both is huge. So I'm going to play, what I want to do actually is get, I don't know if I need to get above it. I almost want to so I can play either this rail and back over instead of draw, or I could play underneath and then play like this way. I don't know. I'm just gonna play here. Yeah, just draw straight back. As long as I get roughly straightish in, I'm good because I can draw over. But I'd like to almost be straight in. So like right here. Not enough draw. This is like the spot you didn't want to get to. Now I'm going to bump the 9. On this shot, these types of shots, when you're bumping it, a lot of times I'll put outside English because I know that it's going to go this way, and then if I hit the cue ball, will hit the rail and come left, and then I'll end up more often with the shot. Gotta make it. Maybe thought maybe I might make the 9. Maybe we'll get off a little bit early today. Anybody out there?
There's one person, but I don't know, maybe. And over there.
Yeah, I hit the brake too hard. Yeah, if you hit it too hard, it floats down this way. So I gotta hit it way harder to make it come back up off the rail. There you go. Yeah, and I don't know if I really care where this cue ball goes. I'm trying to go between them and back up, but it may hit something, in which case it's fine. Oh well. High right, 2 rails. These.
I think it's just me on it. Hey, my love. You done, Zoe?
Yeah, I'm gonna run this rack out.
Okay.
High right. high and left. Ooh. Low right. Spin the ball. Play it here, going across the zone, which is a little bit trickier. Draw with left. Just play 2 rails back across. So this is more like a punch stone. Alright, well I think that's going to be it for us guys. Have a great night, and I'll be on later this week, I think Wednesday.